Hello, welcome to the Timeless Podcast, presented by Timeless Hearing, a network of audiology and hearing care professionals. We're on a mission to convince you that the best moments of your life lie ahead of you, not behind. That your spark, though wavering, can be reignited, your energy restored, and the fullness of both your love and life can be recaptured, possibly redefined. While our focus is on diagnosing and treating conditions of the ear, we believe in treating the patient beyond the audiogram in hopes of better understanding not just that patient's needs, but their motivation towards achieving a better quality of life, their support systems at home, their beliefs around treatment and self-determination. Hearing care sits at the nexus of communication, healthcare, technology, and of course, healthy aging. Hearing healthcare is related to cognition, relational and emotional health, confident and effective gross motor movement, and of course, independence and quality of life. In fact, untreated hearing loss in midlife can lead to irreversible health declines later on. Our goal is to pre-educate patients prior to treatment, as well as drive more interest in treatment and referrals from physicians and healthcare providers and influencers. Today, we'll be speaking with entrepreneur and positivity influencer, Mariah Ramundo. Mariah is a dedicated thought leader, passionate about unlocking potential in individuals and businesses through a holistic, strengths-based approach. With over 16 years in corporate sales, leadership, and human resource management, she combines deep professional experience with a commitment to personal growth and well-being. Mariah's work integrates positive psychology with practice tools, fostering environments where resilience, growth, and success thrive. Through her coaching sessions, workshops, and retreats, Mariah empowers others to connect with their innate strengths and purpose, creating pathways to meaningful transformation. Her approach is rooted in both evidence-based methods and intuitive understanding of each client's unique journey, making her guidance both effective and personalized. Mariah, welcome to the Timeless Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
It's great to be connected with like-minded entrepreneurs.
I agree. I agree. So it's interesting, in your coaching practice, you're working with professionals of all ages and teams of all sizes. And I would assume that many of them are not of advanced age, but they're all aging, as we all are. What are some of the things that you notice and coach to, some of the challenges that your clients approach you with, that if they don't tackle them effectively today, will only grow in complexity as they age?
So the mind is really complex, and that's where I like to start because our thoughts are always streaming. Our thoughts are always going. So if we're... Okay, hang on a sec. This is all editable, right?
Take your time.
All right. So my first instinct goes to the thought process of repeating the same thing over and over again. And that's really what keeps us stuck. And the thing that ages us mostly is the repetitive thoughts of the old thinking. Yeah. And one of the things when you ask me that question that stands out is the curiosity part of our brain that we're all innately attuned to and that we're born with, that requires us to ask questions and just be open-minded to the idea that we don't actually age unless we think we're aging. So it's a concept and a belief of like, what actually is aging? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean that you're have another birthday and you're 1 year older? Does it mean that you're aging with gray hair? Does it mean that you're aging, that your children are older? So just the belief system around what aging is.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that reframing, what are the markers, right? Are they physical or physiological, psychological? Are you rigid versus being malleable, right? I really like that idea of curiosity being the key to maintaining, if not unlocking, some childlike thought and playfulness, which I don't know, for me is really hopeful. And I think you do meet people at every age where you say they've got this energy about them. They've got a willingness and an openness to engage and interact, play with others. And then you meet people of all ages, some of them, chronologically younger than others, who are stuck. Maybe it's that fixed mindset idea. But so much about our thoughts are derived from societal expectations, the family dynamics that we're born into, the identities that we create for ourselves without even really knowing that we're creating identities. And when we need to explore those things later on, it can be really difficult to undo some of that foundational work, right?
Right. So our brain is, everyone's brain is different, and everyone's brain is wired based on our experiences that we have lived through. And so that's why, generally speaking, we're talking about like the childlike energy. Children don't have as many life experiences to have experienced any type of trauma or bias related to this concept of fear or faith. They just move forward, just trusting that their caregivers are going to catch them when they fall, when they start walking. So there's an interesting concept there, but our brains are not only wired based on our experiences in this human body that we've had, it's also hardwired for complacency. And so we tend to limit our potential based on those experiences, thinking this is the way it always has to be, which is connected to that growth mindset, which, to be fair, in psychology, before positive psychology had emerged over the last 3 decades-ish, where it was really being studied, that's how we were wired in the brain, was to believe that you're either born with it or you're not. And that is the concept of a fixed mindset. And so positive psychology really studies that our brains can rewire through curiosity, and we can change. And on a physiological level, we actually do change our entire vibration because of the belief systems that we can grow through with that strength of curiosity.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because you bring to mind this idea that another word for play in some aspects is recreation, to recreate or to recreate. And you could possibly be rewiring your brain through this curiosity, play-based approach, just questioning some of the thoughts, feelings, emotions that are just inherent or innate in our life experience. And you work with some of your clients to really tune into, some of those baseline emotions that they don't know why they're there. They're just, and they may not even recognize it as a feeling. It's just their daily experience.
Right.
Right. And so how does someone first start trying to recognize that they're feeling something that they may not even be aware of? And then once they identify that, to start pulling apart where that feeling might be driven from, and then choosing to feel something different.
So that's a whole process, right? Yeah. So we can break it down. There's 3 questions there. Like, how do they, actually, let me go back to the beginning question, which is, how do they identify, or how do they start to change their belief system around this, right? Like, how do they even start thinking that way? Because they're so hardwired for thinking one other way, right? So when I think back to my journey, and when I hit rock bottom, and rock bottom means it's relative, right? Like, for me, it was burnout and exhaustion with managing a home and a demanding job, and the overhead that is involved with being a parent, and having 2 little kiddos that they were chronically unwell at the time. And so I had experienced severe burnout. And I kept asking myself, like, why does this keep happening to me? And one day I put on this podcast, and it made me reframe the way I was talking to myself and these belief systems that I had. And I was playing a victim role in my life. And I was like, this is like totally changeable, but I'm recreating the experiences every time I think about it. And I come at it from a position of weakness, where I'm really the only one that's going to help myself. Like, no one's going to come to save me. And so just really that curiosity of, like, how am I framing this in my mind? Is this happening to me, or is this happening for me? And once you get into that energy, you go from this mindset of, why does this keep happening, to, like I said, like, what is this teaching me? and recognizing that we all have free will to wake up a certain way every morning with a different belief system or mindset. And we can even just drink water first thing versus coffee, or not hit snooze and get up right when the alarm gets off, or don't grab your phone and get on social media or check your emails right away. You can do a meditation or just sit in prayer. And so it's really about, for me, I tuned into that belief system, and then for me, I intuitively could feel that I was able to get out of that situation through my thoughts, which drove my habits. So it was really about having that awareness. And to be fully transparent, I didn't have anybody really around me that was having a growth mindset at the time, or at least I couldn't hear them.
Yeah.
And the podcast I really needed. It was just like a random thing. I went for a walk. That was one thing I did differently. I was like, I just needed to get out of the house. I went for a walk, and then the busy, always burnout, moving person in me needed to put on a podcast, of course, because my brain couldn't sit still. And so that's how I found this concept. And I think it was actually Dr. Joe Dispenza who has a lot of science to support that our brains actually do rewire through our thought processes. And he has a quote that specifically says that people make decisions for one of two reasons to change their lives. And it's either out of desperation or out of inspiration. So now I make them out of inspiration, but I had to make them out of desperation. And that feeling I experienced when I was so low in my life is a feeling I never want to go back to. And so I've just grown away from that through the daily habits and, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and then just constantly reassessing every day. I'll switch over to you for the next question. But the other thing I want to say is that it doesn't need a new year, and it doesn't need a full moon, and it doesn't need a new week or a new quarter. It's literally every second of your life, because your thoughts are always coming in. And so if you can reframe your thoughts to, okay, what is this habit serving the person I want to become? That's a little bit obsessive. And I had to get a little bit obsessive because my thoughts were so wired for negativity and anxiety and worry that I had to use my OCD that I had with that and just constantly reframe. And I did become a little bit obsessed about it, which is natural with a pendulum. Like you're so far left and then you go so far right. And then you learn to balance the two. And so it becomes an integration. Yeah.
No, I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, in order to overcorrect for that level of intensity of the victim mindset or the negativity feedback loop that you were in, so you overcorrect. And then you want to reach escape velocity, right? And just power through those habits and neural pathways that have been so reinforced, most of us for our entire lives. A lot of it framed by either our parents or the culture or the social group that we were in. That by the time we start asking these really prescient questions of ourselves, we have decades of work that needs to be undone. It's interesting. I was working with an actual coach, a personal trainer, and they told me if you've done a movement incorrectly for 1,000 reps, it'll take 1,000 reps to get back to good form there, right? And it kind of makes sense to me that if we're doing all these mental reps incorrectly, that we've got to undo it with the same amount of intensity, the same amount of commitment and dedication to reverse that. So that makes tons of sense. And I mean, how fortunate for you to have, reached this moment where you were able to unlock this awareness. Had you at one point heard about Dr. Joe, or had you bookmarked the podcast episode and you just decided to listen to it that day? Or was it just some happy coincidence that you went out for this walk and that's the podcast that you listened to?
So I don't know specifically what it was. And I actually am thinking of another podcast. He's now very popular, Rob Dial. He has the Mindset Mentor podcast now. Yeah. And they're short and sweet because my attention span, I couldn't really listen to like an hour-long podcast at the time because my bandwidth was so limited. And I think he mentioned Joe Dispenza or the Heart Math Institute or some kind of affiliation. And then in positive psychology, we study who we are at our best based on our strengths. And so there is an assessment that's very neutral that millions of people have taken across the globe. And my top strength is love of learning. And so it was innately wired in me to be curious, to go learn a different way. Not everybody has that as a top strength, but everybody does have it. Yeah. If it's at the bottom, it doesn't, in the assessment, it doesn't mean that you don't have it. It means that maybe you need to exercise appreciation for beauty to pull up your love of learning. And so that might mean going out for a hike and admiring the flowers and the trees for then your love of learning to ignite. And so it's this concept, it's a Via Character Institute, but it is very neutral based. And to be fair though, not everybody has that as a top strength. I happen to. And so that's what kind of drove me, I think, to tuning into it. The other thing I want to mention about this too is most Americans are burnt out right now. And before 2019, 40 million Americans were like diagnosed with anxiety and on like some kind of medication to support that. And to me, that symbolizes that there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of what could feel like burnout, because that's our thoughts constantly like working, to create a feeling of anxiety, because the thought is what elicits the emotion. And there's other statistics out there that support that over 80% of doctors' visits are stress related also. And so there's this concept of burnout, right? And I feel like a lot of people might just innately say it and affirm it every single day where they really do feel like they're burnt out, but they're not recognizing that when they speak it also, they're affirming it. Yeah. And a quick way to adjust that is through the reframe of understanding this. But my point of bringing that up is because we're already burnt out, it doesn't always make sense to add one more thing to our daily tasks. And so there's this concept of like everybody has their own bandwidth, their energetic bandwidth. Think about your phone. If you charge it overnight and you wake up, it's got a full battery. But if you use it throughout the day, depending on if you're streaming in the background, if you have too many tasks open, your battery will go down faster. And you might need to charge it midday. So that analogy is relative to our own energy systems in our body, and how if we're not fueling it with the right food or thoughts or water or just the things like our basic needs, we might not have the exponential energy to support additional habits. Yeah. So waking up and going to the gym is one more thing to do that requires activity and energy. And so there's this concept of breaking a habit and then adding a new habit. And on average, it takes about 30 days with a growth mindset to create a new habit. And to make sure that you're not experiencing burnout or any type of bias towards the new habit, saying this is never going to work, I've already tried this, it's not working. It's really important to understand that it's likely not working. Maybe you don't believe it's going to. Maybe you have too many things on your plate and you're exhausted, so it doesn't feel good. There's so many different reasons why, but it's important to understand that you can't just add another habit in to change your life overnight, because it's guaranteed you're going to feel burnt out.
Especially if you're already overworked.
Right. Yeah. Unless there's some kind of trade-off. And so it's really auditing and assessing what are the things that are not serving, and what's one thing I can replace over here with a different thing that is going to serve that future potential of what I want to feel like. It's not really so much what I want to be like, it's what do I want to feel like. So that feeling is an innate driver versus like, I want to drive that fancy car, in 2 years. That's external motivation. The internal motivation is a feeling. So I want to feel happy. I want to feel peace. I want to feel abundant. Whatever it is, affirming that will help you understand through that intention of what it is you're looking to add in for a new habit to replace the old ones.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that calculus has got to be difficult for most people to be objective enough to know what to cut out as you're adding things in, to assess things based on the energy versus the value in return, the energy spent versus the value in return, might be really difficult to see. And I think people have, of course, an internal resistance to change. And there's a evolutionary biology use for that because we're communal, and I think we were able to survive for hundreds of thousands of years because we had at many stages along the way, but definitely in the early stages of human development, the better that we were able to stay together and stay as a group, the more we were able to withstand threats, whether that was lack of food, the need to create shelters, to build or dig areas where we could keep our families safe and warm. And so there is this internal drive to not seek out or to apply change as much as I think can be really beneficial for most people. But there's so much external resistance to change too. I mean, our social groups, especially if we're not careful about how we select for our social groups, are filled with people experiencing the same exact thing we are, getting the same exact outcomes that we do. Marginal differences, maybe they've got a different job and they make a little bit more money or a little bit less. But, if everyone around you is complaining, well, you're probably going to end up with this complaint running in your head over and over again, whatever it might be. If everyone around you has a victim mentality, if your family that you were born into is full of people saying, well, it never works out for us, you're going to grow up thinking it's never going to work out for me either. That's our family luck or something like that. And that external resistance or reinforcement can be difficult to break free of. So as you're removing hobbies or activities so that you can add in, getting to the gym in the morning or whatever it might be that you're trying to add into your daily routines, should you also be thinking about which personalities and which relationships you may want to grow past as you look to maybe bring new relationships and more different types of perspectives and personalities into your life so that they can help as you drive internally for change. You're surrounded by external reinforcement for positive change too.
Yeah. So I had a lot of thoughts come in when you were talking. So, mostly what you just shared is exactly why it's really hard to create change. It's because you had suggested, right? Like maybe your family has these limiting beliefs, or maybe your friends or your coworkers. And the answer is yes, they do. Because the only reason why you're thinking that way is because you were trained in some capacity. And Dr. Joe Dispenza has a lot of science to support that we do live most of our life in autopilot. 95% of our lives is out of our subconscious, which just means that it's habit. Just like when we go for a walk, we don't have to think about actually walking if we're able to walk. We just walk out the door and go for a walk. We might have to think about, okay, what podcast do I want to wear? What coat do I have to put on? Do I have to wear a hat or grab an umbrella? But the walking part of it is subconscious. That's automatic. That's our habit. So how we behave through habits without focusing on or bringing an awareness to what they are and, am I a product of my environment, or am I choosing this? So being able to tune into where you're catching those energies is really important to assess what's yours and what somebody else's so that you can get out of the shared energy. So you'd brought up in the beginning this concept of change though. And it made me remember and want to talk about that because the brain is hardwired for complacency. it is comfortable to do the same thing over and over again. That's usually why people don't like to change. Or there's a fear around what could go wrong, or what are people going to think of me, or would there be any type of retaliation for being vulnerable to speak up or change a direction in my life and leave certain friend groups or family even sometimes. And I remember to share that I innately had this passion into science growing up. And I remember in 9th grade specifically, I really caught the attention of everything is energy. So like everything is always in motion. So like everything carries a vibration, which is a deeper concept to go into on a different day. But really this concept of everything is always changing around us because everything is energy and energy is always in motion. So the truth is like, we're not really afraid of change. We're afraid of the uncertainty of what could go wrong if we were to choose this. And it is connected directly to potential retaliation or am I going to lose my friends? Like your whole life is actually going to change when you choose to do different habits. And that is really scary, which is why it's helpful to have at least one person in your life to create a safe space where there's no bias. And the bias that typically comes from ourselves and from the groups that we are around before we decide to make a change is rooted in what is negativity bias. And it's this concept, as you shared, like, oh, we could never do that, or why would you go do that? It's never been that way for our family. That's negativity bias. It's assuming the worst, which we all have negativity bias. Yeah. Every single human walking this earth has negativity bias. And it is the initial thought that comes to mind based on our life experiences. So I don't want to bring up a bad example too much because I'm really good at like creating things through my thoughts. But for example, if you had, let's say, I'm going to use an example of like a car accident, for example. So if you had just gotten into a car accident, it can be triggering for you. So this word trigger can be triggering for people, but it's really just a trigger is like an instinct of like, ooh, this is scary. It's a feeling. A trigger is a feeling. Like, how is this making me feel? And it's an invitation to tune into your emotions. How is it making me feel? Is this real? Yeah. Am I going to die? Or am I going to stop breathing if I do this? And so I actually had to think that way before I started being more brave and courageous to get out of old stuck patterns that I was born into. Not for anybody, it's not bad that I was, it was just the life that I was given. And you almost think that the worst is going to happen, not only if somebody's telling you the worst is going to happen, but your brain is literally hardwired to think that way because you might have just had a car accident. So it's scary to get back in the car to go for a ride again because you think it's going to happen again because it just happened. So that was a lot of information, but I want this negativity bias thing is real. It's real, and it's really important that people understand that every person has it, and so they don't have to take things personal or fear trying new things because it's just how we're hardwired, and we can change that through curiosity.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think the average person who maybe hasn't explored some of these concepts just thinks life is happening and they're along for the ride, and maybe they don't even notice how much they may assign negative outcomes, intentions, negativity to things. And I remember for me, and I've had the great opportunity to work with a number of therapists that have helped me to, expose me to concepts and to language that have helped me to better understand myself. And I remember in one instance, we were just talking about, just journaling and just noting, each moment that I would have, I'm no good at that. You know what? That's probably not going to work. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And anything that had just the slightest, N apostrophe T, in it. And it didn't take long of me tracking that and visualizing it on the paper and being like, I'm constantly telling myself what all my limits are. And I'm not spending nearly enough time thinking about what all my possibilities are.
Right.
And that was really helpful for me. But I think that for many folks, if you were to say, you've got this negative bend in your thought process, they go, well, I'm not a negative person. Almost in a defensive, positioning. But it is something that is just inherent in the human experience. And again, I think it can be traced back to this, threat management, threat assessment mindset of how do I keep myself safe? And it's by not, not sticking out from the crowd or not, wandering too far off. So it served us in the past, and now it just, it tends to be a challenge for many people. And it's interesting. The other thing that you said that really I thought was fantastic is that your whole life will need to change once you start changing your thought process, because your life has evolved to where you are right now based on your thought process, right? So you've gravitated towards the friends that you have because they help to reinforce the thoughts or the identity that you've built for yourself. Maybe the hobbies or the places that you visit. All of those things are baked into who you are as a result of your thoughts. I think it was Ram Dass who said that he had this great awakening, and of course his was, I think, through the benefit of LSD trials back in the 60s, right? But he noticed that there was this identity that had been created, and it wasn't who he was at an energetic level. It was this identity that he needed to create based on conforming to or having an understanding of the way his family system worked, and then his social system worked in school, and then how he needed to prepare himself and present himself to enter the workforce, and all of these things baked this identity that was created, some with outside of his control, but some very much, with his desire to meet these expectations of the people around him. And then he just got to a point where he was spending so much energy trying to live up to this identity that had been created. It was almost an externalization of desire and societal pressure, but it was something he'd internalized his own identity, which is just, it's fascinating when I think about that. And he felt this enormous freedom when he was able to dissolve attachment to that identity. And I mean, he ended up changing his name and a lot of other things. And what I think happens for a lot of people is they get to this point where they say, my identity or the life that I've created for myself isn't working for me. I'm going to create a new one. And then they create another identity that is just as inauthentic to themselves. But they'll chase that for a while, It's like addicts who, stop smoking and then they start chewing gum, It's like they replace one over-index, they're over-indexing for one behavior, they get rid of that, but there's this thought loop, this neural pathway that says you have to be obsessive with something, and so they become obsessive with something else. People quit drinking and then they become gym rats, right? And it may be a healthier obsession, but there's certainly a point at which, overtraining or possibly undernourishing yourself to try to reach some, peak, physique appeal or something could be unhealthy as well. So, how do we? So one, we definitely want to work to unlock or escape from this identity or thought process that we've lived with through our whole lives, but should we be intentional about the thought loops that we then create to try to lead us through the next chapter of our life? How do we choose well?
I love all of what you just said, and had so much information coming in. So how do we choose well? How do we be intentional about our thoughts? So the truth is we're all... our brain is only capable of one thought at a time. So we can't change our behaviors without having like the basic awareness. So our key belief systems are based on our thoughts, which is just everything that we just covered. And so our belief system shapes our habits, right? And so if we are just aware of that, if we're aware that there's negativity bias, if we're aware that our brain is always on, even when we're sleeping, it doesn't stop working. And our brain, when we are conscious, like during the day, or we're living out of subconscious, either way, when we're awake, our brain is still only capable of one thought at a time. So having an awareness of these basic things that are very human of us is step number one. And then recognizing that we are all capable of having a growth mindset through curiosity by just being curious. So your example of, I'm not a negative person, opening up and saying, okay, where am I responsible for this? And am I being negative? Tell me more about that. So asking the person that's saying, like, can you explain that? Like, what do you mean by that? Am I yelling? Am I canceling things? Am I saying bad words? Or am I constantly, saying negative things? I don't know. What does that mean? So really being curious about what people are saying and asking good questions so that you can get clear on what does that mean? Because most of the time the perception of what somebody's saying is a projection of how they feel about themselves. They're seeing it from their limited belief system based on their life experience. And so negativity for you, if you were to say I'm being negative, that means something very different than my concept of what negativity is. And so for me, I would be like, well, I'm not yelling, right? But it's really me not being open to hearing and validating. Like, I hear what you're saying. Maybe I am being negative. Can you tell me more about it? So that's the curiosity that we have to turn on to be like, well, hey, and so that's the loop that we always are connected to because energy is shared. Like, think about if you're having a bad day and you come home and you project it onto your family, right? Because you're just stressed at work. That energy is transferring, then everybody's having a bad day. Right. Energy and emotions always transfer until you're aware that that is a thing, and then you can, stay in your bubble of energy, and then they can stay in there so that you don't have to absorb that negative projection. So that's like step number 2 is understanding that emotions transfer, and what people are saying is really a feeling of how they feel, and they're going to project on you. Then you're going to get triggered. And this is a trauma loop that often happens in lower vibrational relationships where there's always attacking. And so just really being open and just asking more questions is how the brain will rewire and actually keep those two people together. Because if you were to say I was negative, and I asked you, what does that mean? And you said, well, you're always screaming and you're always swearing. Right. I would be like, okay, I appreciate you. I want to have you around. Would it be better if I could, maybe I would take a breath. So let me work on that. And again, it takes about 30 days to break a habit and 30 days to create a new habit, just like your smoking concept. Like, you can't just you don't just quit smoking cold turkey. I mean, you can, but it'll be very hard. But so you have to replace it with new patterns. And so asking and checking in, like, what could that look like? And hey, am I doing all right? Am I improving with how I'm making you feel? And so that curiosity turns into asking questions and getting feedback. And that's actually how your vibration, that's how you'll feel better in general is, asking questions to the people that are in front of you, and then discerning, do I want to be around this person? Are they just constantly telling me I'm somebody that I'm not as I'm trying to grow out of a certain relationship or be better for myself? Are they supporting me? So then it's a self-reflection of, what do I need? Right? Like, I'm happy to satisfy and be better for you, but how am I being better for myself? Because everything is an inside out approach. And so I can't be better for you if I'm not better for myself, but what feels good to me? And so taking pauses and going for walks and tuning into your energy of how you feel and how certain people make you feel and how certain circumstances make you feel, but observing it and not having to do something with it is really, really hard, but that's what's necessary. It's like not becoming those emotions all over again. Dr. Joe Dispenza has a lot of science, which I have had many therapists and coaches, but I don't use my psychology background for therapy specifically because therapy often has you repeating the same trauma that you've experienced. And Dr. Joe Dispenza has a lot of science and research to support that your body doesn't know the difference if you're just sharing the memory of it or if you're reliving it. Your nervous system feels the memory because the thought, the memory is eliciting the emotion.
Yeah.
And so that's how a lot of people feel like stay stuck, is because they're repeating those old tapes of this is how it is, this is how it was, and this happened to me, and why me every time. And when you use curiosity combined with what coaches provide, which is tools and resources and additional people to support your growth, because what most people need today isn't the same thing they're going to need in 3 months or 6 months, because they're always evolving. That's the human evolution, right? We want to evolve. We don't want to just stay the same for the rest of our lives. And so, I mean, some people actually do, but most people, if they had a safe space and they didn't have all the trauma, or grief. So trauma and grief are interchangeable for me because they are the same. Grief is the feeling experience with trauma. Trauma is the impact on your nervous system. It forces your nervous system to go into fight, flight, or freeze. So trauma has a bad rep in the world, but trauma is really just a trigger for your nervous system to feel that fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. But it is usually associated with grief too, that feeling. That's usually the feeling that will be coming online with trauma, because as you grow, you're losing things. And through the grief process, whether it's you're losing a person or a thing or an old friend group or a job, you will experience grief. Some people say, well, I just lost my job. It was so traumatic. Yes, but all that really means in your body is that you were put into a fight, flight, or freeze state. And scientifically speaking, it disconnects your decision making part of your brain. And so then you actually do physically get paralyzed or want to fight or want to just stay in your bedroom for months at a time. And so when we understand the science behind what trauma is and these triggers and stress, what it all does to our nervous system, then we can decide what things make my nervous system feel safe. Is it people? Is it things? Is it coaches? Is it therapists? Now, therapy is good for intervention. However, unless they're providing resources to go recreate with in between sessions, so you don't have to create a dependency on your therapist, that is good. So last comment about all what we just talked through from your last overview is that, hang on, I just lost it. So it was regarding new habits. I don't know, we'll come back to, therapy. So therapy isn't bad, but when we're replaying the old tapes, we end up just reliving it and we won't really get out of it. Dependency. So I wanted to talk about dependency for a second. You had mentioned like addictions. I'm addicted to positive thoughts, right? So I've learned to balance and integrate it too, but because our brains are hardwired, our brains are capable of only one thought at a time, it's important to find the balance, or like when you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. And so when you go from the negative, you're like, okay, what's the opposite of that? I listened to a lot of Abraham Hicks during this time period too, when I was experiencing a lot of that heaviness. And that one quote where I would always say to change my thinking, to reframe when I know what I don't want, I know what I do want. So what is the feel good thing that I want? And that would help me get clear on my goals, on who I want to become. And so maybe we'll talk about that next, but it is really about identifying first, after you're aware of this, of like, okay, who do I want to become? What version of me do I want to become? That's what I want to be, not what everybody else around me wants me to be, which, to be fair, is really just keeping them safe. And that's a whole nother topic of people pleasing. But when we get clear on what we want and how we want to show up and how we want, like what kind of parent we want to be, what kind of employee we want to be, what kind of manager we want to be, and what kind of human do we want to leave this earth what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? We can start to reverse psychology that into, okay, what kind of habits would get me there? And it's really like it's a process. And as long as you're patient with yourself and you understand that you are human and you're allowed to make mistakes, and we stop shaming ourselves, a lot of times we can say, well, I could be better, and I can't believe I did that, and why did I do that? Shaming, Dr. Hawkins studies the emotional frequency. So every emotion is a frequency, it's energy. And so if we are angry or we have fear or we have shame, we feel really bad, right? But if we experience like dancing or walking or having good conversation, we feel good, right? So you can't really argue. It's not controversial with feel. Like everybody has emotions, which elicits a feeling, right? So that's human in us. And once we accept and forgive ourselves for what we did up to this second of our life right now, it's all done. When we recognize that we don't have to be that person anymore, like it's already done. Like I can just choose to be a different person. And like you can start to observe the differences between yesterday and today, or last month and next month. And you're like, holy moly, this stuff really does work. Then all of a sudden life just starts expanding for you.
And I think the first step is often the hardest, right? Because once you get into a positive feedback loop, I tried something different and I had a better outcome. It fuels you to take the next step, but you had to take the first step. And I think that's where so many people are stuck. And I love this thought that you don't have to wait for Monday, the next quarter, the next new moon, New Year's to make changes, because I mean our experience is we're aware of the passage of time, which is a human construct for sure, but we certainly are aware that things have happened to us in the past, and we're aware that there will be something that we construct in our thoughts as the future, right? But we only ever live the moment, the day that we're in, right? I mean, this is the day of your life. This is the day of your life. And it's going to, it can be influenced by the way that you want it to change. And that's so freeing. And I love Abraham Hicks, by the way. I remember probably back in 2017, someone sent me an audio clip of his track, Everything Is Always Working Out for Me. I don't know if you've ever listened to that. And he said, listen to this, the friend who sent it to me said, listen to this, over and over again before your next, sales pitch or job interview, whatever it is. And I found it to be, a great mantra, and it really was helpful in a lot of ways of just, giving me this, speaking to your subconscious, because it just plays repetitively over and over again. But I remember I went on a date or something like that, and the young woman was like, oh, so how are you? How's it going? And I said, everything's always working out for me. And she just looked at me like I was, either arrogant or strange. And I had to explain to her, I said, hey, I'm rewiring some neural pathways here. So bear with me if it seems a little off. But I was quite certain that she hadn't sat down for coffee with anyone else who had said that to her, which, just brings up this thought that, like, why are so few people invested in trying to manage and change their thoughts for the better?
Because it's uncomfortable to sit with the uncomfortable feelings, and that is what is necessary.
What's uncomfortable about it, if you don't mind me just asking for more? Is it that it's new? Is it that it's so different than what the expectations are on everybody else? Is it that if I need things to be positive or better, then inherently I am negative or worse? Like, what's the most uncomfortable thing about it?
So I can't speak for everybody. However, based on my own research with my clients over the years, the uncomfortableness is really, it's kind of connected to toxic positivity, which in positive psychology, a lot of people think that it's fake to be happy and feel good. A lot of times that's their judgment, right? And they're not being curious about,
I've been
like, how
accused
do you...
of having toxic positivity.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And for a while I would take that personal, actually. And I was like, but I'm not. And I would try to defend myself instead of just being who I was. And I was leaking energy in all these parts, trying to prove myself to people that didn't see my potential.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with them. It was just an awareness that I had in terms of, like, wait a minute. So going back to your question about, like, what is so hard to change, in our culture, we haven't always had tools to help ourselves through managing bad feelings or bad emotions. And the word bad is relative. There's not really anything good or bad. But if we were to talk about feel-good feelings, that's happy, joy, excitement. And we know that the bad feelings, right, bad are anger, shame, fear, resentment. And so before the internet existed, we didn't really have many resources to tune into to ask questions. We were just kind of told it was one way based on our one doctor or the person in our house. And you didn't really get to ask questions because it was this way or else. In a way, it was built on conditional love, to be honest. But in a lot of homes, at least, in a lot of workplaces, and it was do this for me or else. And there wasn't an open concept of being able to talk about your feelings. It was like, you're not allowed to be mad. And that mad was actually making that person feel uncomfortable because they didn't know how to work with it. And so ended up just becoming this like, this energy of humanity not really knowing how to manage or regulate their own emotions, and then not also fully understanding that every human has emotions and we all experience anger and resentment and sadness and grief, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And at different levels of intensity too, right?
Yeah. So I think that is what people are most uncomfortable with, is feeling uncomfortable feelings because they were not really shown or told or shared with like how to manage them. And the concept of not becoming them by affirming like, I am sad or I am mad. You're allowed to say those words, but every time you say I am, you're affirming it. And so you're also kind of rewiring your brain to be mad, and then you actually will embody that energy anyway. And so a lot of times what I do is like, I'm feeling upset about the situation. I'm going to give it 24 hours and I'm going to express how I feel to this person or to this experience, whether it's to a person or just writing it out or even doing a voice memo to myself on the phone so I can hear myself reflect back on like what I'm actually feeling. And in positive psychology, we allow every human permission to be human. Like allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself permission to be a human. That means like feel your feelings. Don't become them. You can observe them, but don't sit within them for months. And that's where a really good coach or a therapist can come in to give you new tools to help to rewire your brain out of that heaviness of grief. And it's not to say that I don't have grief in my life. I definitely have different variations of it. Even today, right now, I have grief in my life. And I'm able to move through it through incorporating new habits and new mindsets around how to handle it. But after a while, it becomes a habit and it's just a lifestyle. And so you end up just becoming more resilient to the impact of grief and trauma. And I want to just comment on like, any kind of loss is you will feel feelings of grief, whether you get a new car, whether you get a new house, whether it was on good conditions or bad. If you lose your friends because you choose to go over here and to spend time with yourself, or if you physically experience the loss of a loved one, grief is always going to be there. And when we understand that it's never going to go away, but we can bring in tools and habits to support the grief so we can feel better, we give back to ourselves. And this concept of losing someone, I lost a lot of family at a young age. I was so afraid of dying. And when I realized and found my faith system and trusting and believing that like, it's not just me and this human body. Like there's other things out there. I believe in God. And when I was at the rock bottom in my life, I had no connection with God. And so once I started understanding that there's outside forces that are always with us, however, I don't know how they're going to show up, but I feel them. And as long as I was to practice that daily, those things are free. And if you can feel the difference in just trusting, because the opposite of fear is trust. And if you fear you're going to die, you can trust that you're always going to be living, right? Because the soul is eternal. From my perspective, like I will always. That's a totally different topic, but I recognized that I was so afraid of dying that I wasn't living, and with family, leaving Earth at a younger age than I would want to, and having children myself, I wanted to do better. Not that they didn't do the best they could with what they had, but they didn't have the internet. They didn't have all access to podcasts like this and other things to work to improve their lives. And I chose to be better for myself and to be better for my family because I didn't want to be depressed for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, and my own experiences with hitting emotional rock bottom, I found it to be very necessary to evoke the type of change that I needed in my life as well. And it's so interesting, this, post-traumatic growth idea. And I think, people can experience it several times throughout their lives, but I think many people experience it with one defining moment or one defining phase or segment of their life that got, that changed their worldview and their perspective and made whatever happened to them or for them prior to that moment seem less important than what was going to happen after that. So, cancer survivors will often talk about how it changed their lives for the better. Perhaps in some cases was the most remarkable thing to happen for them. I think a lot of people in addiction recovery need to, destroy every single relationship in their life. Every bit of unconditional love that's felt for them needs to be removed so that they can then grow and reform from a place where it is dependent on them, their belief system, whether it's faith related or faith and internal thought process together. So I think those moments can be so enlightening, but they're not required for people to make a positive change, I would imagine. I think it makes it easier when there's nowhere to go but up. I think you start to remove all alternatives. But for folks who want to experience some positive change in their thoughts, in their relationships, in their performance, whether it's professional or otherwise, what would you possibly help in kind of the first initial steps if you were coaching with a client? I said, well, I don't want to go through all of this pain for the next 5 years. I want to start experiencing some change today. What could some of those initial steps be?
So gratitude is a feeling that we feel when we are grateful for something, and it's free. And I believe it's an alchemist, so we can take those bad feelings of like, it's not sunny out today and I'm just dreading this drive to work, or I hate my job. And you can take gratitude in the morning and say, I really appreciate what this job provides for me. You might hate your job and not get along with your peers. However, it is covering, putting a roof over your head. It's putting electricity on it. It's you have clean water in your house. You have heat in your house. And if you don't have all of those, or any of those, or if you don't have a job, going back to like your human experiences is you have your senses. And so feeling into your body, like, I'm grateful I can walk today. Some people can't walk. I'm grateful I can see. Some people can't see. And I know that sounds so strange to say, but that's actually how you start feeling better about your life, because you can feel the feeling of like, wow, there actually are people that can't see, and I get to see today. And it's not to cast judgment on or judge their situation or feel bad for them. It's about having empathy, not sympathy, and understanding, wow, I really do have a lot in my life. And once you can expand beyond your senses, you can go to, well, it's finding gratitude in those really hard experiences. So like when my dad passed away and I had kids and I was like sad that they wouldn't see him and I wouldn't be able to like call him or get to know him as like a grandfather, I was still grateful for the time that I had with him. And it didn't make the circumstances change, but it made me feel better about my circumstances. And so if the most important thing is to feel. And if you can start with gratitude, that is like the best thing to do every day, every morning back during this time. I would just write down 3 things I was grateful for. I actually didn't feel it. I thought, I was into all this stuff with Joe Dispenza and affirmations. And I was like, okay, I am grateful for today. I'm grateful to be alive. And I would just like repeat it as a hedonic like activity.
Yeah.
And nothing was happening. And I was like, this isn't real. This is too woo-woo. And then when I wasn't feeling good and I really needed to feel good, and often when I was on my walks, I would express it and I would say it out loud. And I would when you say it out loud, your body actually can feel it better than writing, but you can start with writing or thinking it.
Yeah.
And that is like the place to go, and to remember that you have to embody and feel the feeling of gratitude. You can't just say it, because that's faking it. And there's this concept of faking it till you make it. Yes, that does work. However, you have to feel and embody this future version of you and the gratitude, or it's never going to come in. And there's a whole concept of energy there, where like attracts like, which we'll talk about another time, but it is on the concept of law of attraction and law of assumption, like assuming you have what you desire already, even if everyone thinks you're crazy, because you will attract it. Yeah. So it's not really hustling to go get the thing you want. It's really just feeling the feeling of joy and gratitude. And then you're going to watch, like, you become a magnet for miracles when you express gratitude. And it doesn't even need, it can be for yourself. And I'm grateful for these hardships in my life, because it taught me strength. It taught me courage. It taught me how to advocate for myself. It taught me, I'm a better person in these areas. And so if you reflect in your journey and find gratitude in those really deep, dark pockets of grief, and what did it show you? Like, what did it give you? And it start with like simple things like strength, courage, new friends, or a new house, or whatever it was. Yeah. Gratitude will be the game changer to start with. It's free. You don't have to go buy a new membership. Just start with gratitude, because remember, your brain is only capable of one thought at a time. So if you can make it gratitude, and then you tie in this concept of energy, you're actually going to attract more things to be grateful for, because you're feeling it and you're emitting that frequency. Just like when you're feeling bad after a really stressful day of work and you come home and you give that to your family. Same concept with gratitude. So it's really about being intentional with your thoughts. If you're obsessive with it, it's okay. Just remember to take breaks, but just make sure that you're recognizing how you're talking to yourself. Yeah. One last comment about that, though, is I had to get into this energy of, in psychology, in traditional psychology, we call it dissociation, like dissociating from our experiences and from our body. That really just means looking at it from a different perspective, as though you are the coach in your mind, you are the consultant, you are the therapist. And a lot of times, for actually almost all of my clients who have children, I would ask them, how would they coach their child through this experience so they can get out of the tension of the stress of it, which is causing their nervous system to disconnect from the decision-making part of the brain. So they can't even think about gratitude because they're so stressed and angry or sad. But if they were to look at it from a third-party perspective through dissociation of like outside looking in, and say, how would I coach my child through this? Like, I would not want my child to feel this way. Then you can start being your inner coach. And I liked that. And I love that interdependent model, because you don't need a therapist. You don't need a coach. You don't need the gym. You don't need these things. Yeah. They're nice to have, but it's interdependent, where you can borrow for those strengths, or tune into these frequencies, and not ever have to need anything or anyone for the rest of your life, which really helps you to feel empowered and knowing who you are, and that you actually have control of everything around you once you attune, the frequencies of what you're inviting into your life on the daily.
Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, how often do people talk to themselves the way that they would never talk to anyone else? Just beating themselves up, beating themselves down, just throwing every obstacle in their own way. And it's interesting. So self-talk is something that I had to become really aware of. And I think I was lucky enough to not have to overcome like the devil on my shoulder being one that was telling me that I was worthless all the time. I noticed that my self-talk, especially when I'm doing something like physically grueling, could be a, endurance competition or just something where like I have to keep going, just chip away at something. My self-talk, I hear this voice. I kind of talk to myself as if I was my little brother, or I was talking to my little brother. And it's a lot of like, come on, buddy, you can do this. Just come on, get up, keep going. We got this. Come on. And like that has been amazing to me, because it's someone there on my side, right? And it's not a different, personality somewhere in my head, but it is very much this love, this intention, this recognizing that I'm worthwhile, this never-ending support that I've generated somehow internally that pushes me forward, and it does help me when I've had overly emotional days, and I mean, you're never going to stop reacting, emotionally. We're humans, right? Like you said, you got to permit yourself the experience, the full expression of yourself. And on those days where maybe I don't represent myself in a way that I'm really proud, this voice still says, okay, well, let's do better today, bud. And there's a kindness to it, but there's also a, challenging to keep moving forward, because it's really easy. And I've had moments in my life where it's been really, really easy to just stop, isolate, and hide. And that almost was never the right thing to do in those moments.
Yes. However, sometimes your body needs that when it's coming out of a lot of stress, because that's always a good sign, though, that your nervous system is relaxing. If you feel, the key is just making sure you have motivators or people around you to pull you out of that, or checking in. And I always recommend letting people know and to see who respects your boundaries. So like if you have a negative friend group that like always makes fun of you or says like, good luck with that or whatever, it's important that you announce your intentions. So, hey guys, I'm gonna be working on myself for a little bit. I'm gonna be going to the gym. Do you guys wanna come with me? I'm not gonna be drinking next weekend, so don't try to force me. Like, I know like it's fun to joke about it, or I can't go because I really am not feeling good after I'm drinking and I need to replace it with water. People make time. There's a quote out there, people make time, I don't know, basically until you are diagnosed with something, you don't take control of your health. Yeah. And so many people wait to get those results to say, oh, I have to make an improvement in my life. But why do you have to wait to be threatened, right? Like, I think that's the human in us. But why do you have to like hit rock bottom? Yeah. If you do it once, that's okay. But if you keep doing that, I would invite you to look into like, why do I keep trying to hurt myself? And is it the devil on my shoulder? Like, am I connected to God or my guardian angels? Or do I believe that there's, more to life than just sitting in this space for a long time? But I think it's important to announce like what you're doing so people can honor and respect it. And then for you to observe, okay, who is being supported, who's checking in, not to judge them if they're not. And it does hurt if they don't. But if you're focused on your goals of being a better person and not drinking or and going to the gym, and you're going to see who wants to rise with you. And you might actually be a leader and a point of inspiration for these people that they just always needed, but no one had. And so if you look at it like, maybe I can help more people because this feels really good. And I know they don't feel good because I feel like that every weekend, right? If you can see it from a different lens, which is not judging them, it's really about loving yourself. That's really important. And I wanted just to comment about the obsessiveness of your thoughts. We can manifest because we attract what we think about through the emotions that we feel when we're thinking about it. And there's a little bit of manipulation that can happen with that. So there's a lot of talk like this with manifestation, right? And yes, it's fun to manifest, right? If I want to manifest $1 million, I could probably do it, but that's not going to make me feel good, right? Like financial freedom feels good for me, but I don't need to put a dollar amount on it. When you work to manipulate energy because you understand how energy works through your thought, like as you go on this journey, it is actually almost like working with the devil because you're not allowing your soul to live out. You are actually controlling the way your life works. And that is still considered control. And we all work to control circumstances when we feel anxiety that makes us feel uncomfortable. And so it's important to understand where your ownership is in controlling and learning to balance, okay, like it would be nice to have, a lot of money. It would be nice to have a new car. It would be nice to have a new job, and not forcing a job that's not good for you just because you need a new job and you need more money. It's about declaring your intent and knowing what you want to feel when you're in that job and what kind of culture you want to be around and what kind of people you want to be around. And then also completely surrendering and trusting that if I show up and I'm prepared and I ask good questions on this interview, the job is going to present itself for me. I don't need to manipulate and manage how the conversation is going to go because I really want this job. That is manipulation, that is control, and that is technically what manifesting is once you understand how energy works connected to your thought process. So this concept of worrying all the time, and you're going to attract more things to be worried because you're attracting how you feel. If you feel good and you feel rich and you want to make more money, right? Because everybody wants more money, right? Who doesn't want more money? You really want the freedom that's attached to it. So if you can feel the freedom of it and then attune, okay, what feels good? Does this job feel good? How are these people showing up? Are they triggering me because this manager used to behave the same way? Let me ask good questions through curiosity and feel into if this opportunity is the best for me. And same thing when you're going to a gym and maybe you're leaving a friend group and you're coming over here and it's really just, hey, I want to improve this part of my body. What do you recommend? And then listening to how they want to help. And then you are allowed to leave that coach as long as you didn't agree to a contract for exclusivity and stuff, but you're allowed to leave them to try something else. And that's the other part of where I think people get stuck is controlling to control again, because they get excited about manifesting real quick once they start feeling the feel good feelings, but then also allowing things to work out the way they're supposed to, and understanding you're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to go back to your friends and say, you know what, that wasn't for me. I'm going to start drinking again. You're allowed to do all of those things. But what is it that you want to do that makes you feel good? And that can be your legacy, right? Especially if you have kids. How do you want them to remember you? How do you want to change your ancestral line? How do you want... I did this exercise and it sounds morbid, but and it wasn't because I wanted to die. It was because I asked myself, how do I want to be remembered? Actually, Rob Dial, and this one podcast recommended it. And I wrote a note to myself, I wrote out my obituary, and I was then I got inspired on the things I wanted to do, not the things I wanted to obtain. I grew up with not a lot of money, so I always wanted a nice car. I always wanted nice clothes. I wanted a big house. I got all of that when I was feeling burnt out and exhausted. I had everything I ever wanted, and I couldn't enjoy it because I felt like I did not feel good. So then I learned that money didn't buy happiness, and it was really the happiness I was chasing. And so finding things that made me feel happy, people, places, and things.
I did the obituary exercise probably back in 2014, 2015, and I found it to be hugely enlightening to me as well. I think, when we have good mentors, good parents, good teachers, sometimes they can help us understand perspectives about those sort of things. When we don't, we kind of are just living in the moment, each moment. And really, I found it difficult to assign the correct amount of value to things, just as you've described, I found that to be a great exercise. It is interesting that you talk about this idea of it can be really self-centered to manifest, right? Because it's all about, what do I want? How do I want to be, right? And I think finding that balance in, well, how do I directionally adjust point myself in that direction where I'm going to feel, when I'm going to live the life that I feel like I want to live or want to feel or want to be, but also surrender to this larger energy flow that we're a part of. So whether it's, this idea of a soul, or the idea of our energy that, continues on, beyond this experience that we have, serving that greater flow while also trying to make some changes in your life. I think if you're really early in the process, it's almost like, Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's like you need to just get yourself to a better place, right? Mm-hmm. And I think once you start to climb out of, those lower vibrations or those areas where you're stuck, the relationships, the situations, the substance use, whatever it might be that's got you feeling trapped, once you build enough momentum and you're into a higher vibration or a better situation, I think it's much easier at that point to start gaining some perspective and saying like, okay, I don't want to be as self-centered or obsessive about these things. I want to think about my legacy. But I think early on, it's probably, maybe requires a little bit of obsession to change, those thought processes. So you have to evolve and adapt as you go. So never stop learning, and that also would lead into some of the curiosity piece. So it's really interesting. So is it easier to change when you're younger and still more malleable, or is it easier to change when you're older and have a longer list of stuff that you just want to stop doing?
So the word easy is relative, right? I don't think it's any easier with any age. I think it's really just a concept and a belief system of understanding that change is possible and then trying it. So I agree with your last statement in terms of like, you do have to get a little bit obsessive and control your thoughts and manage your thoughts, not control, but manage your thoughts in terms of, is this a feel-good thought? Is this making me feel good? Is this real? Did that really happen? Does that person really feel that way about me? Or do they feel that way about themselves and they're projecting onto me? And so just kind of coming into this awareness, because you had mentioned, I just wanted to bring that back up in terms of like, once you recognize that you are in full control of your life through your thought process, you can integrate a little bit back and start giving to others. But you have to experience the feeling of it and saying like, holy moly, this actually does work. Yeah. Then you scale back. And I found myself donating time and energy and books and clothing and hours into the regional food bank and all these things to give back, because who doesn't like to donate, right? Everybody, it feels good. And actually there's a lot of science that supports, like when you donate something, it elicits a feel good feeling similar to like gratitude. And then you end up like attracting more of that, but you're not donating to get more back. It's really on this, Deepak Chopra has a book called The 7 Laws of Spiritual Success. And he talks about the law of giving and receiving. And so when we're controlling and I need this and I want that, it's all about taking. And if we don't give back to others, whether it's a lending ear or if you have, if you end up manifesting a lot of money and you can share that with others that have supported you along the way, you can give back in so many different ways, whether it's your energy, your time, your money, your donations of your clothing. And that's like the best way to start integrating back into the human experience once you realize. So it's the reflection. So taking time to reflect of like, wow, it did take 30 days, but it really does work. And now I have like all these random people and opportunities around me, and I don't really know what to do with them. And that's where you surrender, like, show me the way, like where am I supposed to go with this? And then if you're confused, it's about giving back. When you give back to others, you're going to get more clarity because you're not in this chasing energy of needing to obtain and take. And then you're going to get, I call them downloads, but you're going to know exactly what you need to do next because you're not in the state of needing to do something. You're giving, and that's your flow state. And so your nervous system is not stressed anymore. It's not fighting or flighting or freezing because you're giving back. It feels good. And then when you're in those feel good moments, like if you're donating at the regional food bank, you're going to end up getting all of these random ideas on what to do next in your life. And that's where I find not just donating time, but like out for walks. If I'm not needing to respond to my emails and I'm in that stressed mode, I'll get information that comes in if I just say, okay, what do I need to do for the rest of the day? This isn't working. I need to change up my calendar. Maybe I reschedule this meeting, and then you find out when you walk back into the house, the email comes in that meeting you were just thinking about, you wanted to reschedule, just came in as a cancellation. And I'm like, wait, did I make that happen? Or did I know it was going to happen? Like, what just happened? Yeah. So I would get lost in the curiosity of, am I psychic or did I make that happen? It's actually both because of the energy of that. And the truth is, I don't really know. I actually don't know if it's both. I'm assuming it is. And I just completely surrendered. I was like, okay, it must be God or somebody else. I don't know what's really going on, but I know it's working and this is what feels good. And I have to keep doing this. And, when you are struggling in the future, you don't have to go learn new things often. It's really going back to the things that helped you, a year or two ago, and those basic things that pulled you out of it in the first place. So humans can get caught up on like all the research and development because things are always changing and there's always new things emerging. And, maybe I need to go to the salt den and go get an infrared light and all of these other things. But really, you just need to get back to your thoughts and your daily habit of writing and feeling gratitude and not grabbing for your phone first thing in the morning, but maybe grabbing for water and just sitting in peace and quiet and feeling like, where am I at today? I know it's February 2025, but like, how am I feeling? And what do I need to do today to continue feeling like this level of peace without distractions? And that is actually the thing that I often go back to when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's not that I need to go get another gym membership or adopt a new subscription for another podcast. I actually just need to sit for 10 extra minutes every morning and write out like my goals and how I feel and things I want to fix, and not necessarily fix, but like adjust in my life, and then hand it over and just see where the day takes me. But I got clear on my intention for the day and I want to feel good. Yeah. And I carry how we do. One thing is how we do everything. And so now that I started that momentum with this new habit, again, in the morning of sitting in my thoughts and feeling good and peace and quiet, now the rest of my day will carry that energy. Similarly, if you wake up worrying about the thing you fell asleep worrying about, you're only going to worry about more things during the day, and you might even attract the thing you were worrying about because thoughts are energy. Yeah.
So we're not as powerless as sometimes we may lead ourselves to believe. In fact, we're quite powerful, but we need to wield that power with intention. Mariah, thank you so much. Where could our listeners find out more about you? I know you have a new book out. You also have a great platform coaching individuals and corporate programs. So where can people find out more?
So my website will be evolving, right? And I'm always evolving, so things will always change. Just as you mentioned, I just co-authored an amazing book called Healthy for Life that can be found on Amazon, which will soon be on my own website. But my website is mariahramundo.com. And so that's where you can find any updates or upcoming workshops and have access one-on-one to the resources that I have. I'm really big into sharing the things that have helped me. And that's my give back is, okay, I hear that you need this. You actually don't need me. You actually need to meet Cliff, and here's an introduction. And so the beautiful thing about that is you don't really get me. You get me and my extended network of people that have supported me, because I didn't just get here on my own. I have many people, things and resources that have provided this pathway of abundance for me. And so my website will be constantly updated because everything is always changing and I'm always changing. And so don't look at that as bad. It just means that I'm exercising my strength of curiosity. I'm learning new things and I'm plugging new things into my website. So I'd recommend accessing me there.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's clear to me, and you mentioned this earlier about some of your key strengths, that you are a student and a teacher, and you're gathering information and passing it on. And I think you do it in a really, really fantastic way. I appreciate you, your energy, your time today. No one can change the fact that we will age, but we can, through mindful choices, applied disciplines, and vision and commitment to our future selves, have some say in just how well we'll age. Again, this has been the Timeless Podcast presented by Timeless Hearing, a group of healthcare professionals on a mission to convince you that the best moments of your life lie ahead of you, not behind. That your spark, though wavering, can be reignited, your energy restored, and the fullness of both your love and life can be recaptured or possibly redefined. Visit us at timelesshearing.com or any one of our area practice locations and come find out how. Thank you so much for your time. If we've enlightened you, sparked your curiosity, or prompted your feedback on how or where we got it wrong, please comment, share, and follow. Mariah Ramundo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cliff.